Next week, the world's leading climate scientists are due to publish their latest findings on how quickly our planet is warming. And tonight, there's ample evidence of the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. Wildfires, often started by human hand but fueled by baking heat, are tearing through forests around the globe. In the Yakut area of northeastern Siberia, more than 4.2 million hectares of forests have burned this year alone. The smoke has traveled as far as the North Pole and driven record carbon emissions. Here in Europe, Greece, which recorded its highest ever temperature this week, has battled more than 150 wildfires in recent days. Villages were evacuated on the island of Evia, whilst scores of homes have been burned in the suburbs of Athens. And on the Italian island of Sicily, firefighters have been tackling 40 fires in the provinces of Palermo and Messina, with flames fanned by strong winds and temperatures of 42 degrees Celsius. In the United States, Californians have grown used to wildfires, but the destruction caused by this year's blazes has been remarkable. Thousands have left their homes as two fast-moving fires continue to raze homes and businesses. Here's Simon Brown.
Look at this Ace Hardware here. Look at this Ace Hardware.
This family video is from a small town in a big state. Just over 1,000 Californians lived in this sleepy outpost.
Over there is the Pioneer Cafe and Bar.
And this is it now. The Dixie Fire raging across this part of California has made a small town a ghost town. The only sound of life is from the crackle of flames and wind. The inhabitants here are America's newest climate refugees. An entire town has been swallowed, and its remaining bones are still burning. The fire's insatiable appetite for devastation shows no sign of stopping. It has been active for 22 days and devoured 322,000 acres of land.
My heart is just aching for what people are dealing with up there right now, and so many other places. Tennant, Colfax, over in Trinity, Siskiyou, but we lost Greenville tonight, and there's just not words for how us and government haven't been able to get the job done.
Here, firefighters have been up against strong winds combining with warm temperatures that increase the risk of fire, a danger that is becoming more acute in this part of America.
We have been through a decade where we've been at or above some of the warmest temperatures that we've seen in our observed record. And here in California, that extends back to 1896. In 2014 and 15, we set new records for an annual temperature, and since then have been right there at that warmest edge.
But California is past the edge of crisis. And as dystopian pictures like this become more dominant, a shift may be happening on the right of American politics.
The real question is not how are we going to respond today, but this situation is going to get worse. We're going to see more fires. We're going to see more destruction. It is becoming a political imperative. My view is that in time, in large part because the US government has a $28 trillion deficit right now, we will have to move into this phase where we not only incentivize good behavior, but also begin to limit bad behavior.
It's not just emissions that are going up. The urgency for climate action is rising too. On Monday, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is poised to deliver its first major report in 8 years with a stark warning. This is a satellite picture of a warming planet. From space, Earth is crying out for help.
Well, triggered by soaring temperatures, the wildfires afflicting Turkey are the worst in the country's history. 8 people have died and thousands have been evacuated from their homes, with fires burning in an area more than 3 times bigger than in an average year. Here's our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman.
Where the forest meets the sea, there is fire. The heat from the flames here along the Turkish coast is the most intense ever recorded. The helicopter couldn't put it out, this man says. Amid temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, and winds so strong that they have reignited fires previously brought under control. Last night, those fires reached the compound of a power plant, forcing its workers to evacuate. Though this morning, Turkish helicopters, along with a Spanish plane, extinguished the flames. President Erdogan met some of those affected along the coast last weekend. His usual mantra of jingoistic self-sufficiency has been compromised by being forced to accept foreign aid.
8. günde bu çalışmaları sürdürürken
He's an increasingly unpopular president, last night claiming from his 1,000-room palace that the fires were the biggest ever. Yet he's now so powerful that escaping the blame is that much harder. Much of this Aegean coastline votes for the opposition anyway, and now its residents are furious at the government's admission that its own firefighting planes were badly maintained and unfit for service. Volunteers have armed themselves with fire extinguishers, and while arson or human error probably lit these flames, as they do every year, the scorching heat of climate change seems to have made this the worst year in living memory. In the village of Mazi, near Bodrum, eyewitnesses say the fire moved from trees to gas cylinders to parked cars and then buildings. Gizem Orhan ran a hostel and tried saving it with buckets of seawater.
Gerçekten derin üzüntü içerisindeyim.
I'm so sad, she says, because you can replace your belongings, but growing trees could take more than my lifetime.
Hayvanlar var.
Government officials have abandoned attempts to blame Kurdish militants for deliberately causing this disaster, which has displaced tens of thousands and left 8 people dead. And the long-term fear is that some of these pine forests will not be replaced, because last week the Turkish president approved a law allowing him to change their status in favour of tourism and economic development. The government denies it, but fires intensified by climate change could be the precursor for rampant construction along this endangered coast.
Well, I've been speaking with Professor Michael Mann of Penn State University in the United States, and I began by asking him why we were seeing so many extreme weather events happening at the very same time.
Well, what we're seeing happen here is the signal of climate change emerging from the noise. These sorts of events have become more plentiful, more extreme, and it's now gotten to the point where we can literally see the impacts of climate change playing out in real time in the form of these unprecedented weather disasters. So that's basically what we're seeing. We are now seeing and feeling climate change in real time.
So to what extent in your own country is this provoking people to think originally? Let's take Las Vegas. In 20 years, it has doubled in size and it is a desert settlement. Can we go on this way?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, there's some larger issues here about sustainability. We've learned that from the pandemic, the fragility of our civilization, nearly 8 billion people on a planet with finite resources, food and water and space. And now we've got climate change, human-caused climate change, entering into the mix, exacerbating those challenges. There are some difficult decisions that we are going to have to make when it comes to areas that are now literally uninhabitable to human civilization because of the profound threat of wildfires or floods or other calamities exacerbated by climate change.
Now, are we noticing this because we're talking about climate change all the time? Or is it a fact that we're now seeing incidents of infernos that we've never seen together on this scale?
Yeah, there's no question. We're seeing unprecedented wildfires around the world. In the Arctic last year, Siberia was, experiencing the worst wildfire that they've seen. But meanwhile, Australia, a year and a half ago, when I was down there on sabbatical, was experiencing unprecedented wildfires. Now in the Western U.S. and other locations. Look, we're making the dry regions of the planet drier and hotter. And when you take those conditions and you put them together, you are going to get the sorts of unprecedented wildfires that spread out over larger areas, burn hotter, spread faster, do more damage. That's what we're seeing.
It's no accident that COP26 is meeting this year, but do you have any confidence that despite this evidence, these people will actually come up with serious solutions that make a difference?
Yeah, well, we've seen some bold pledges now from the UK, Boris Johnson, from the United States, now with Donald Trump gone and Joe Biden president, we're seeing leadership in the US. So we're seeing some bold pledges for reductions of carbon emissions, consistent with bringing those carbon emissions down by a factor of 2 within the next decade, what we need to do. But there is still an implementation gap, which is to say the actions don't yet match the words. While Joe Biden and Boris Johnson have made commitments to bring carbon emissions down dramatically in the decade ahead, they are still, for example, supporting pipeline projects that invest further in fossil fuel infrastructure when the very conservative International Energy Agency has told us if we are to prevent catastrophic warming of the planet, there can be no new fossil fuel infrastructure.
But you can say that and people can hear you, and you've said it often before. What is going to provoke these people to change their minds and change their actions?
Well, we can only hope that what we're witnessing now play out in real time on our television screens, in our newspaper headlines. These climate change driven disasters have awakened those who, had not yet recognized the urgency of action. And so I am optimistic that there is renewed focus. There is a new sense of urgency. There's a global youth climate movement that has really focused attention on the need for action. All of these things come together to give us perhaps the best opportunity we've yet seen in making real strides, in acting on climate. But now the actions have to match the expectations.
And finally, can you think of a single action that somebody could do that would have a domino effect on the rest of the world?
World's largest fossil fuel companies coming out and saying, yes, for decades, we denied this problem. We hired people to attack the science, to attack the scientists, and we're here now telling you that we have a crisis.
Professor Michael Mann, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.